Hi, we're going to talk about the geologic timescale. Earth time is hard for humans to imagine because we live in our lifespan and in the amount of time that one human lives or can hear from stories of generations, the stories my grandparents told me about my parents and now. That's kind of the scope of what we think in. And when we try and think of something like 200 to 300,000 years ago, modern humans first show up on planet Earth, that's really hard for us to imagine. But in terms of Earth time, we're actually talking about much longer spans of time. So what I want to think about is like multi-book series. So Twilight, Divergent, the Hunger Games, the Harry Potter books, all of those are multi-book series that really, I'm going to talk about Harry Potter because I'm more familiar with it, is one long story. All right, the beginning of the first book, we know Harry Potter's just turning 10. You're a wizard, Harry. And there's a bad guy. But by the end of the book, we continue having all of these conflicts all the way through until the very end of the last book when the big bad guy is dead and Harry Potter's living and yay, everybody's going to be okay. Now, that's all one big long story. I mean, in terms of Harry Potter, every day the sun came up and every night the sun went down was another day. But book one has a whole lot of big things that are going on, and it comes to a climax and a resolution, and that's the end of the first book. Second book starts because, hey, something new and different is happening, and another big thing is going on until it's over. And each book has its own something that's very different about what was going on before it and what comes after it, even though they're part of one big, long story. So if we're looking at Earth history, we can think of Earth as being approximately 4.6 billion years old. That's where we get our evidence from the radioactive rocks. We look at moon rocks, we look at meteorites. Current best estimates from our scientific measurements puts Earth at about 4.6 billion years old. Now, each one of those days was part of a year. Each one of those years, Earth just keeps moving. But just like the books, we're going to divide geologic time into 4 big books. We're going to call those big chunks eons. Those eons were the Hadron, the Archean, the Proterozoic, and the Phanerozoic. Now, in each one of those, something very different is happening. Again, each day was another day, but during the Hadron, Earth is too hot, no life. We've got molten rock, Earth's just cooling. It's not until the Archean that we start to form continents and oceans. And during that time, we start to see evidence of single-celled life, very simple single-celled life. And it's not until in the Proterozoic that we start to get more complicated multicellular life. And it's not until the Phanerozoic that we get this huge explosion of lots of different kinds of plants and animals. Matter of fact, the Phanerozoic marks the beginning of when we see any animal type life as far as our classifications, animals, plants, fungi, plants, whatnot. So each one of these, something very major different is happening. The key dividing line here is biodiversity. Just like J.K. Rowling, when she's writing her book, she didn't just decide, hey, every 120 pages, I'm going to start the next book. The next book started when something in the story got big enough to end, and the next book started. These eons on Earth's timeline are separating major changes in biodiversity. Now, the very last Phanerozoic, we've got a whole lot of different changes that we have in the fossil record, and all the time before that, we sometimes refer to as this kind of like super eon Precambrian life, because the evidence of the Cambrian period, which is the beginning of the Phanerozoic, is this huge explosion of animal life. So everything before that is kind of lumped in and said, oh, that's pre-Cambrian. Now, let's take a look at the Phanerozoic Eon. That 540 million years. Let's go ahead and stretch that out for a second. There's enough different things going on that we also then kind of break that down. Well, think about the book. The book isn't just page after page after page. Books are divided into chapters, and in each chapter, something different is going on and happening, and then something different happens in another chapter. So The Phanerozoic Eon is separated into 3 eras. We've got the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and the Cenozoic. We don't need to go into all the particular differences, but for instance, the Mesozoic was the time of the dinosaurs, and a great big giant meteor crashing into planet Earth ended the dinosaurs and allowed the mammals to take over, and that's where we are today. So, geologic time, we break into big chunks. Eons are major, huge changes in life on planet Earth. No life, simple singular life, multicellular life, animal life. When we get into the Phanerozoic, we break that into 3 big chunk eras. Again, each one of these eras is a dividing line between huge, major changes in biodiversity, what kind of things are on there. And just like a chapter can be divided down into pages and paragraphs and sentences, we do further divide eras down into periods and epochs, but we don't need to know those right now. So those are our divides, eons broken into eras, major changes in biodiversity.